Welcome to another episode of the Everything Antarctica podcast. I'm Matty Jordan. I'm joined once again by Johnny Harrison. This week, we're talking about a day in the life in Antarctica. Firstly, we'll focus on a day in the life of a workday, and secondly, we'll talk about what life is like on a day off. Johnny, welcome back.
Thanks as always, Matty. Nice new spot that we're sort of recording in, which is cool. So.
Yeah, managed to get a nice new room. We're actually sitting in a pseudo Shackleton's hut at Cape Royds. Some of you may recognise this area from Instagram and TikTok videos and things, but this is Shackleton's hut, and yeah, it's a beautiful space that we're sitting in. So. Not actually at the hut though.
No, we're not. So yes, very good question, and often one that you see online as far as you'd get asked it a bunch of times around, what's life like? What do you actually do? So I guess firstly it's probably different depending on who you are, but maybe Matty, if you wanted to start it off with what you kind of typically do and how you start your day.
Yeah, this is definitely a question that I get all the time, almost every day. People saying like, what's a day-to-day like? What do you do in the mornings? How do you eat lunch? And so we'll go through that, but we'll focus on the work day first. So for me, let's take a Monday. Monday seems to be my busiest day when I'm south at Scott Base. So I'll talk about it from probably a summer and a winter perspective as well. I think we can cover those off because they do vary a little bit. But typically, I would wake up in the morning probably about 5:45 and get changed and head straight to the gym. So I'd do that pretty much from 6 o'clock through to about 7:15, sort of daily. Typically, I'll have a standard gym routine. I'll mix up muscle groups depending on what day of the week it is, but that will be for about an hour, maybe a little bit longer than an hour. And I try, it's been tried and tested so that I can try and get into the gym when not too many other people are there. So most people tend to go in the afternoons, but I've found that in the mornings it is a really good way to start my day, and it also doesn't seem to be so busy. So I like to start my day in the gym, and then about 7:15 I'll go through, toilet, shower, brush your teeth. I'm not a big one for breakfast, so I'll go into the mess after shower and things like that, and just grab a cup of green tea and then make my way down to the administration area. My day starts at 7:30, so I'll have a meeting with the team and we'll talk through some of the plans for the day and try and coordinate the different groups that are working down at Scott Base. So that might be the engineering team, the operations folks, base services, which are those that look after your cooking and your cleaning, or your field staff, which are the ones that might be accompanying a science group out into the field for the day. And then in my role as part of the Scott Base redevelopment, we'll feed into that system as well, just to deconflict a lot of the day's activities. So that will be the first half an hour up until about 8 o'clock. And then 8 a.m. we'll have a base meeting within those different groups. So I'll often attend a meeting of the engineering team to find out what's going on there, to help us coordinate the different activities, because that's the main group that I'll work with. But we also have separate meetings for our individual group, so we can plan what's happening for the day. And we call it a toolbox talk. It's essentially just a chat about what resources we need. We'll always talk about safety and environmental things, and just make plans for the day, work out who's going where and what that looks like. And then probably from about 8:30, when that meeting finishes, I'll check my emails and do sort of daily admin, plan for my individual part of the day, which can vary. Sometimes it's half an hour, sometimes it takes me an hour and a half. And then following that, we'll get to about, call it 10 a.m, and we'll go in and have morning smoko, which is not something that everybody does, but it's a good chance for everybody to sit down. It's kind of like a morning tea for those who don't know what smoko is, if you're not Australian or from New Zealand. It's a pretty Kiwi or an Aussie term, but generally just like a little snack in between breakfast and lunch. And also maybe 15 minutes, another good opportunity just to touch base with the team and see how everyone's going. And then back into the regular work day. So I might walk around doing some safety audits. I might do some general inspections on progress, see how things are at. I'll take progress photos, check in with the team, see if there's anything else that they need. And generally try and deconflict activities that are happening in the same area. that will probably take me through till lunchtime, which is about 12 o'clock, and then that's one of the big meals of the day where everybody gets together. And again, same deal, just general chit chat, talk about how your day's going, talk about if you need any assistance for the afternoon or what you're planning on doing for the afternoon. And then lunch is usually like, it's a big meal. You'll find most of the base will come together for that. So you could be sitting next to a scientist one day, you could be sitting next to one of the leadership team the following day, you could be sitting next to an early career researcher the day after that, or you could be sitting with the engineering team or whatever it is. It changes day to day, which is really great. One of the cool things about being down south is the number of different people that you get to chat to. And the cool thing about the mess or the galley where we eat is that people typically don't use their phones there. So it is a time for conversation and just, getting to know your fellow folks that are down there. So it will be for about an hour. About 1 o'clock we'll go back to work, and again, depending on what's happening for the day, my day is different, but pretty similar along the lines of what I would do in the morning. I often have meetings back with the team in Christchurch just to keep them up to date with what's going on, so that will often take up part of my afternoon. And that will roll through until afternoon smoko, which is essentially the same as morning smoko, except instead of happening between breakfast and lunch, it happens between lunch and dinner. Again, that's a short break, maybe 15 minutes, and I'll typically just have a cup of tea, and I might have a biscuit or something and just chat to the folks that, catch up again on what's going on. Back to work again through till about 5 p.m. And then, depending on what other folks are doing, after work, I might tag along with a mission. I might go for a walk. I might go for a bike ride. If the ski field's open, I might go for a ski. I might go for a cross-country ski. It all depends on who's doing what and what the weather's like. Sometimes if the weather's not so great, I might play pool, I might play darts, I might play table tennis, I might go rock climbing. Generally just a time for socialising. And then dinner typically starts about 6 o'clock. So I'll probably start dinner, I don't know, maybe 6:15. And then, after that, there's a bit more freedom to go off and do whatever you like. So typically for me, that's probably going for another walk if I hadn't done so already, or if I was working late, then I'd postpone the walk until after dinner. But there's usually lots of folks that get together and plan different activities, and I'll tag along with those or start my own. Happy to go for a walk. I'm happy to go for a solo walk, so often that might be how to fill the afternoon. And photography and taking pictures of things. I might go out and see the seals in front of base, or later on in the season, if there's penguins around, then I'll probably spend quite a bit of time taking photos of penguins. And after that, come back in and probably just get ready for bed, start winding down. I might watch a movie if there are some folks that are in the movie room watching a movie, and then pretty much go to bed, and that's a working day for me. So pretty standard.
There's a few things as far as sometimes that will change depending on what's happening. Later on in the week you might go to McMurdo, or it also kind of depends on whether or not you're on duty, right? So in summer you're expected to be on if you're base staff, you're expected to be on fire duty one week in 3. So that means every third week you're essentially requested to stay at station unless you can find cover, so that you can go off site and do things, even including recreating. So that's something to sort of bear in mind, isn't it?
Yeah, I think often you find the week before you go on duty, people try to cram a lot in. So spend a bit more time outside, you appreciate the environment a little bit more, you go out and look at the seals and take photos of the wildlife and things, knowing that in the following week you're potentially not going to have those opportunities unless you can find cover. So that is another thing to consider, which comes up once every 3 weeks, which to be honest it's not a burden.
Yeah, I mean, when you've got 24 hours of daylight anyway, and most often you'll find that if you actually want to get off station for a wee while, there's more than often somebody that's actually more than keen to cover for you and reciprocate, right? So, if somebody comes up and asks you, yep, sure, if you're not going anywhere, just, no worries, that's fine, away you go, no problems, eh?
Like if you're planning on watching a movie but someone else wants to go off for a walk, then if you're not on duty, you're going to be staying at base anyway. You just switch your cover and they'll reciprocate it later on. Might be the following week or the week after. But yeah.
And how does that change dramatically as far as summer, winter? So that's your sort of summer day. What does a winter day look like for you?
Yeah, I think just with winter, because there's less people around, there's not quite as much happening. I tend to find that the day is a little bit slower. So not so many meetings that would happen throughout the day. The people tend to become quite autonomous, and you have been working with this very similar group of people for an extended period of time, so you really trust what they're doing. And it could just be as simple as a verbal update at smoko or lunch to say, hey, things are going well, or it'd be good to, if you can come up and have a look at this and help me solve this problem or whatever. Whereas in summer, it's not uncommon to be walking down the hallway and someone taps you on the shoulder being like, oh, can you come over here? And then you end up walking back to the area of base that you've just come from because someone needs your assistance to solve a problem. Or it could just be as simple as, hey, can you give me a hand moving this bin outside? Or, can you just supervise me while I'm doing this so that there's someone watching? Or can you help me refuel a vehicle, which is a 2-person job? So often you're getting pulled in lots of different directions in summer, and it's very hard to plan your day. Whereas in winter, I think your days tend to be quite similar, and you can make a plan that will not really change throughout the whole day. So that's the big thing. I tried to keep my routine pretty similar in the winter as well, in terms of like gym, green tea, meetings, work, smoko, work, lunch, work, smoko, work or walk, dinner, recreate, photos, things. So yeah, in that regard, the timeline for my day is pretty similar. It's just I find it less disruptive in winter because you've got less people and
less going on.
Yeah.
And then what does a typical day off kind of look like?
This is very different for everybody. So for me, I always made the most of getting outside, going on trips, going to see things, and just trying to spend as much time outside as possible. But there's also the whole life admin component to a day off where you need to do your washing, you need to have a shave, although in my case wasn't quite like that, but get a haircut. How do you touch base with family and friends back home and all of that sort of stuff? So it varies week by week. So I found that if I was on duty, my day off on the Sunday would typically be spent doing my laundry, catching up with friends, getting a haircut, and just chilling out around base, maybe watching a movie. If I wasn't on duty for the week, I would often go and participate in fam trips or the off-base recreational trips to go and see the huts, for example, or to go out to a penguin colony, or to go into an ice cave, or go crevassing, or go rappelling down a crevasse and things like that, or go skiing. So yeah, it comes down to whether on duty or not, but yeah, typically I just try and be outside as much as possible. So go walking. There's only 5 or 6 recreational trails around the place, and I've done them all so many times, but they're different every day, and they're different at different times of the year. We've got different light from the sun, or no sunlight at all in the winter, and just really enjoyable. Sometimes I'll go to McMurdo and say have brunch there. That was quite a common thing for me to do in the winter. Catch up with friends over there. Might go rock climbing at their climbing wall just to mix it up. So yeah, I find that it did vary a little bit, but typically Sundays are down days. No one really works on Sundays unless there's something really pressing, and if that's the case, then they'll often take a Monday off if they've worked through the Sunday, just to make sure that they are getting that rest, because it's a long period of time that you're down south and you're working 6 days a week, and it could be anywhere up to 60 hours a week. So yeah, just making sure that you get that time to decompress and wind down is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And so at Scott Base, it's typically the Sunday that is the day off that everyone has, and unfortunately one of the chefs doesn't get the day off on the Sunday, and in summer there's usually two or three shifts depending on the number of people on base, and often it's one of the days that you look forward to, not only because it's your one day off that you get a week, but it's also brunch day. So instead of your standard breakfast that you might have, or your breakfast options that you get during the week, it's usually a full cooked breakfast, and people often look forward to that day. And as you sort of made mention, there's also the opportunity to, particularly in winter, we don't necessarily have that, and so then it's kind of like, oh yep, cool, we can go over to McMurdo if we're not on duty, and go and enjoy their brunch, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, so maybe that's worth touching on. Just on a Sunday, the day is a little bit different. Most people tend to have a bit of a sleep in, and brunch runs from 10 till 12. So yeah, often people have a bit of a sleep in and then sit down and have a cooked breakfast for brunch, and people kind of come and go over the 2-hour period rather than, everybody's there for the 1-hour period of lunch or breakfast or whatever it is during the week. So typically if people are going for a walk, you either commit to doing a full day adventure and you leave sort of 7 a.m, 8 a.m, or you have brunch and then you do your recreation after sort of midday. And it varies week to week.
It depends on the weather and all those kind of things as well. And
absolutely,
as you sort of made mention, fam trips, because some of those things are very seasonal based. And so, say like we want to go to the huts and see some of the historic things. Some of those are only accessible very early season due to the sea ice conditions. So, come the end of sort of November, there's no chance of getting back up there, and so then things change, and that's where like we've sort of discussed previously, some of those other recreational activities come into play, like the ski field and things. So there's plenty to do, there's no doubt about that. But Sundays is definitely get out and make the most of it if the weather allows.
yeah and it follows a similar pattern to the science, right? So a lot of our sea ice science happens early on in the year when you can get out onto the frozen ocean. It's thick enough, it's very stable, and it's all good to travel on. But like Johnny says, come that late November, early December period when the sea ice starts to warm up and deteriorate a little bit, the focus shifts away from sea ice science, but also shifts away from sea ice recreation. So there's a bit of a pivot period, sort of mid-December, where things go from long distance sea ice travel to let's recreate on land and more closer to station, which is when the ski field opens up and when you start abseiling down crevasses and things like that. So it varies year to year, and it's quite dynamic, but it follows a very similar timeline.
Absolutely. And the other one, I guess, to make mention of is typically speaking on a Saturday. That's not necessarily like a standard work day as far as what you've just described before. Typically, we'd finish up a little bit earlier and have a base meeting and some base tasks. Explain some of that. Yeah,
so Saturday, typically, I think it's around 3 p.m. Everybody gets together, stops work, and it's everybody on station who comes into the mess or the galley, and it's an opportunity for people to give an update on a whole bunch of different things. So who's arrived, who's left, what flights can we expect in the coming week, who's going to leave, what science is being conducted, what other general information do people need to know about cargo, logistics, science, recreation, and talk through these different aspects so it gives everybody on station the same information at the same time. And then that typically runs for about half an hour, and then afterwards we often get together as a community and undertake base tasks. So I don't know if you want to tell us, Johnny, about base tasks and some of the things that we might be expected to help out with.
Yeah, it can vary hugely depending on what's happened. So if a storm's just gone through, often it's like, okay, all right, reinforce that all the doors need to be cleared, because obviously there are fire hazard there if we can't get out the doors and outside of the station. So there's things like that. There's the moving of food is often quite a big one. So we've got food stashed various different places around the outside of the station, and so sometimes the chefs need a hand of, okay, can we get all of these different bits of food brought back to a closer central store so that we're ready for the next week. Or it might be the person that looks after the bar and shop needs a bit of a hand to move some stock, or it could be any number of those kind of things, like general stuff that potentially a person on their own it would take too much for them to do it on their own. But by the time you end up adding a whole bunch of hands, many hands makes light work, and so in the space of about 10 or 20 minutes you've undertaken the work that would take this one person hours and hours to do on their their own. So that's kind of the idea, is that it's kind of let's spool up and get as many people on this. Let's hit it pretty hard and take volunteers for various different tasks, and away we go and get it over and done with. And then after that, once you're done with your base tasks and that's all closed out, that's you for the day, and you can pretty much start getting ready for your weekend. So the only sort of caveat, and people that don't necessarily fall by that same routine are the people like the comms operators and the chefs. So their tasking doesn't necessarily adhere to that same thing, and they carry on working afterwards. Do you want to maybe touch on the comms operators in summer and kind of what they do and how that role works?
Yes, that's an interesting one. I think there's 4 comms operators throughout the year, and they'll work in 8-hour shifts for 24 hours. So we've always got people in the field doing science in the summer, and they need to be able to make contact with base at all hours of the day. So they'll be there manning radios, they'll have a phone, and they're the point of contact that if anything happens, they are awake to go and wake up the relevant people who need to respond. Or it could be as simple as, someone's out in the field and they want a joke. And the comms operator can go into the computer and get a joke or a riddle or something like that, just to help the morale of the folks that could be, 2, 3, 4, 5 people out in the field for an extended period of time that don't have a whole lot of regular contact. So we make sure that we've always got 24 hours of communications happening, just in case something happens. Because they work in shifts, they often have a different day off. So some of them might have the Monday off, the next one might have the Wednesday off, someone might have the Friday off or whatever. So it doesn't fit into the regular pattern of what people do. And likewise with the chefs. So they'll work in shifts as well. But because there needs to be food on Sundays, we can't just have the whole chefs working Monday through to Saturday and then no food on Sunday. So they'll take it in turns as well. And one of the chefs might get a Monday off, another chef might get a Wednesday off. So yeah, it just varies week by week. But we tend to be quite respectful as well, because those folks are often sleeping during the day, the comms operators. So just recognising that not everybody's on the same time frame, not everybody's got the same pattern. So yeah, if you're walking down the corridor in the middle of the day, just be aware that someone might actually be sleeping. So be courteous around that sort of stuff.
Yeah, it's good. What would you say around so comms operators we just touched on, and that role is a position typically filled over the summer months. What happens in winter? What do we do around comms over the winter months at Scott Base?
Comms in winter is an interesting one. So we do this thing called mouse rounds, and I think that probably deserves a full episode on its own, because there are so many intricacies between trying to maintain communication while people are off base for an extended period of time, but also you don't have the resources to have 4 people doing that role throughout a day. So yeah, I think we should do a full episode on mouse rounds and just generally what that is, because it's looking after the base, there being communications throughout the day, checking the base at the end of the day, and essentially putting the base to bed. So yeah, we'll touch on that in a future episode.
Sounds good. And we've also the chefs, obviously we have multiple in summer, and goes down to often just being the one over the winter. And so on the Sunday when actually this person can't be working 7 days a week like the rest of us, so often in the winter months the roster will also mean that the chef ends up following the same day. So typically on the Sunday, which is part of the reason why we're offered the opportunity to go to McMurdo for breakfast, because essentially we don't actually have anything served on the Sunday. And my first winter we actually ended up having a family night. I think we've touched on that before. Yeah. And so we took turns throughout the winter, that each Sunday night a different person would cook something. So it's kind of you break it up, or you just kind of fend for yourself. And often there's so many things that the chefs and the cooks will kind of pre-prepare, and they're sitting in the fridge and the freezer, and you can kind of they're there ready for you to just go and help yourself. So you're never short of plenty of food, that's for sure.
Yeah, in our case the chef would prepare meals for the Sunday night. It was often leftovers from the week, but it just goes to show how different every winter can be. We didn't do anything like that. We didn't some people cooked every now and then, and we'd often help out for big events like midwinter dinner, but it wasn't a rolling routine or a standard thing that we did, which is really interesting because every year is different.
Yeah, it's so funny how many things are so the same, and even down to the thoughts that you think, and you thought, oh well, I must be the first person to think that. Chances are you probably aren't. Right. But then there's these things as well where it's just like, yeah, and then you've got this group of people, and it really is up to them as to how they want their winter to be, which is cool, because it means that no two winters are the same. Yeah.
That's why people keep going back for seconds.
That's right. Seconds and thirds and fourths and fifths. And yeah.
Cool. So yeah, hopefully that's given you a bit of an idea on what we do day to day. We touched a bit on recreation, so we've got 2 episodes about recreation. We've done one on indoor recreation and one on outdoor recreation, if you want to get into a little bit more detail about what we actually do on our time off. But yeah, that's just giving you an indication of what a general day-to-day life is like. It's very similar to life back anywhere else on the planet. The only difference being essentially is you're living in this tight-knit small community, and your meals are prepared for you, and you share bedrooms with other folks. So very, very similar to regular life, but obviously has an interesting twist and a few little differences here and there. So yeah, that's pretty much life, day-to-day life. We hope you've enjoyed this week's episode of the Everything Antarctica podcast, where we've touched on what life is like day to day living in Antarctica. This varies between different Antarctic stations and different years, depending on what's going on, but this is a generalisation on what life was like throughout our summer and our winter periods. So hope you enjoyed. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe, like, and give us a rating. It helps us get the message out to more people. Cheers. That's it for today's episode of the Everything Antarctica podcast. Thanks for listening. If you want to find out more about us as hosts, you can find us on Instagram at Matty Jordan and at Johnny Harrison NZ. We're also on socials. You can find us at Everything Antarctica. This episode will be released on all streaming platforms, and the long form video will be found on YouTube. Check us out wherever you listen to your podcasts.
If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a 5-star rating. This will really help us in our mission to make this podcast as good as it possibly can be. Please share this episode with your friends and social networks so we can spread the word to more people.
Until next time, stay cool.